The morning sun crept across the skyline of Seattle, washing the city in shades of pale gold and muted blue. Rising above the streets, the headquarters of North Spire architecture gleamed like a fortress of glass and steel, every pane polished to perfection, every line of its structure a testament to control and ambition. Inside, the air smelled faintly of espresso and polished wood, mingled with the quiet hum of printers and the low murmur of designers discussing deadlines. North Spire was more than a company. It was a stage where reputations were built and legacies were defended. Adrian Cross, 34 years old, sat at the very top of this tower, the youngest senior partner in the firm's history. He stood in his corner office, hands clasped behind his back, his reflection a mirror of tailored success. His suit, charcoal with a subtle pinstripe, fit him like a second skin. His tie was knotted with military precision, and his steel-gray eyes seemed to cut through the morning light. Those who passed him in the halls whispered about his accuracy, perfection, and relentless drive. To Adrian, the office was a battlefield disguised in luxury. Every project was a campaign, every presentation a duel. He had learned early that power came from brilliance and reputation, and his reputation was one of exacting standards and merciless judgment. He had dismissed proposals that other firms would have praised, pushed his team to exhaustion, and outmaneuvered competitors with charm and ruthlessness. Yet beneath the polished exterior lay something brittle, a hollowness he never allowed himself to acknowledge. His father had built North Spire from nothing, a man of relentless vision who believed architecture was less about beauty and more about domination. Buildings were monuments to power, symbols that outlived the men who designed them. When his father died, Adrian inherited not just the firm, but the burden of expectation. To falter was to dishonor the Cross legacy. To deviate was to betray it. And so he built, he competed, and he won. But in the quiet moments between victories, Adrian sometimes caught himself staring at his reflection in the glass and wondering what he was building toward. This morning was no different. He reviewed the thick folder on his desk and the Harrison Civic Center project details. It was a design that showcased his signature style: clean lines, towering spaces, and an aura of grandeur meant to impress. It was flawless on paper, a fortress of order, yet something in him whispered that it was sterile, lifeless. But he pushed the thought away. Perfection was all that mattered. The intercom buzzed, breaking his concentration. "Mr. Cross, the staff meeting begins in 5 minutes." He gathered his papers and moved with unhurried confidence down the glass corridor. Employees fell silent as he passed, their conversations dropping into whispers. They respected him, feared him, but they never truly knew him. Few had dared to try. The conference room was already filled with partners and associates, the table stretching long beneath the soft glow of pendant lights. Victor Hale, the managing partner, stood at the head, his presence commanding in a quiet, steady way. "Good morning," Adrian said, his voice even as he took his place. Victor smiled faintly and waited for the room to settle. Victor announced that I would like to introduce a new team member before we begin today's agenda. She comes to us from Atlanta with a portfolio that has already drawn national recognition. She has been awarded the Pritzker Emerging Talent Award and will lead our new Civic Engagement Division. The door opened and the air shifted. Every pair of eyes turned as Maya Johnson entered. She wore a crimson dress that seemed to challenge the muted palette of suits around her, and her steps were unhurried, confident. Her natural curls framed her face, and her skin seemed to glow beneath the artificial light, radiating a quiet power that no one could ignore. Adrian's gaze caught hers for a fraction of a second, and though he quickly looked away, something unsettled stirred within him. "This is Maya Johnson," Victor continued, gesturing toward her. Maya offered a warm smile. "Thank you for the welcome. I am honored to be here and eager to bring new ideas to North Spire." Her voice carried grace and firmness, leaving no doubt that she intended to be more than a token hire. Polite applause filled the room, but Adrian noticed the flickers of skepticism in a few faces. the quiet glances exchanged by those who already judged her. He had seen it before. Newcomers rarely lasted long if they could not adapt to North Spire's relentless culture. Yet something about Maya told him she would not bend easily. As the meeting unfolded, Adrian forced his focus back to the agenda. He spoke about the Harrison Civic Center, the numbers, the projections, and the image of progress it would bring. His words were sharp, rehearsed, his confidence unshaken. But when Maya raised her hand to ask a question, his voice caught almost imperceptibly. Her question was direct, not deferential. She asked about community spaces, integration, and people rather than prestige. It was not the kind of question that one points in this room. Yet she wondered it calmly, and Victor looked intrigued rather than dismissive. Adrian felt the faintest flush rise in his cheeks. No one had spoken to him like that in years. When the meeting ended, he returned to his office, but his thoughts refused to stay disciplined. The image of Maya lingered, the way she stood unapologetically among them, unshaken by the undercurrent of doubt. He had met countless architects, designers, and partners, yet none unsettled him as she had in a single hour. His phone rang. Derek Whitman, his oldest friend, was on the line. "Golf this weekend, Adrian? Or are you still chained to that desk of yours?" Adrian gave a distracted answer. Derek chuckled. "You sound strange. What happened?" "A new designer joined today," Adrian admitted. Derek's voice turned sly. "Oh, the diversity hire Victor mentioned." Adrian frowned. "She is far more than that. She won awards that most of our staff can only dream of." "Is she attractive?" Derek pressed, half teasing. Adrian hesitated, and that silence was enough. "Remember last year at the club?" Derek said, amused. "You told me you never date black women. Not your type, you said." His words hit harder than expected. At the time, it had seemed casual, thoughtless banter. Now, with Maya's presence still fresh in his mind, those words curdled in his memory. He ended the call abruptly, but the damage was done. The rest of the day stretched long and restless. He found excuses to walk past Maya's new office, where she arranged her awards on a shelf with precise care. He paused at the door. "Need any help settling in?" She turned, meeting his eyes without hesitation. "Thank you, Mr. Cross, but I am fine." "Call me Adrian," he corrected. She studied him briefly, then inclined her head. "Adrian, then." Their exchange was polite, but a quiet tension pulsed beneath the surface. He offered her a seat at the Civic Center planning session. She accepted but made clear that she would not be anyone's token. Her firm yet calm words unsettled him more than open hostility would have. That evening, as the city lights shimmered across the bay, Adrian stood again before the glass wall of his office. He should have reviewed blueprints, answered emails, and prepared for tomorrow's battles. Instead, his mind replayed her voice, her confidence, the way she had made him question the design he thought flawless. He remembered Derek's mocking reminder of his past words, and for the first time, he felt shame that clung like a shadow he could not escape. The tower around him stood tall, perfect, unyielding, yet a crack had formed somewhere within, a fracture that no polish could hide. He did not know it yet, but the arrival of Maya Johnson had set in motion the unraveling of everything he thought he knew about architecture, the world, and most of all, about himself. And as the night deepened, the gleaming tower felt less like a fortress and more like a cage, transparent walls closing in on a man who had spent his life building monuments to strength, only to discover the fragility at his own core. The next morning dawned with a gray drizzle that streaked down the vast panes of glass at North Spire, softening the sharp lines of the tower and muffling the city's noise below. Inside, the offices buzzed with renewed energy. Staff hurried between cubicles with coffee in hand, presentations tucked under arms, their voices low as they speculated about the firm's newest hire. For some, Maya Johnson represented novelty, a signal that the firm was evolving. For others, she was merely an emblem of corporate strategy, another face for the annual diversity report. Adrian Cross walked through the halls with his usual precision, his step steady, his face impassive. Yet his mind was anything but calm. He had spent a restless night wrestling with thoughts that refused to leave him in peace. Maya's words at the meeting echoed in his memory, her challenge to include a gathering space in the Civic Center, her insistence that architecture must serve more than prestige. He could still see how she stood her ground with quiet confidence, unaffected by his title, reputation, or the calculating gazes of the partners. It unsettled him, and that unsettlement was something he could not shake. In the break room, he paused to fill his cup with dark coffee, overhearing two junior designers whispering near the counter. "Did you meet the new hire?" one asked. "A real statement piece, if you ask me. Bold dress, bold presence." "She is talented, but come on, you know why they brought her in," the other replied. Adrian's jaw tightened. He stepped forward, and the men fell silent at once, standing straighter as though caught in a crime. "I expect every member of this firm to be judged on merit," Adrian said flatly. "Not assumptions. Is that clear?" They nodded, flustered. Adrian turned away, surprised by his own vehemence. A year ago he might have ignored such comments. He might even have let them slide with the same indifference he had shown to countless subtle slights before. But something had shifted. Later that day, the planning session for the Harrison Civic Center convened in the large conference room, blueprints and models spread across the table. Adrian led the discussion, his tone crisp as he outlined his envisioned design elements. His colleagues murmured approval, taking notes. It was all going according to the familiar script, until Maya raised her hand again. She said, "Your design is undeniably striking," her eyes fixed on him, "but it is incomplete. The people of Harrison need more than walls and glass. They need a place to gather, to celebrate, to belong. You have designed a building. I propose we create a heart." The room grew still. Without waiting for permission, she crossed to the whiteboard, picked up a marker, and began to sketch. Her lines were quick but purposeful, outlining a plaza with circular seating, open steps that invited people to linger, share, and live. She spoke of farmers markets, concerts, and outdoor classes, of a space that would breathe life into the structure rather than imprison it. Victor Hale leaned forward, his expression thoughtful. "I like it." "Adrian, what do you think?" All eyes turned toward him. Ordinarily, he despised interference. His reputation was built on rejecting alterations and defending his designs with unyielding confidence. Yet as he studied her sketch, he could not deny the truth. The addition was not just clever, it was necessary. "It is a good idea," he admitted at last. "We should incorporate it." The surprise that flickered across Maya's face was quickly replaced by quiet satisfaction. She returned to her seat, and Adrian felt the weight of something shift again, an invisible axis tilting beneath his feet. Afterward, he caught her in the hallway. "That was good work in there," he said. "Thank you for being open to it," she replied. "Not everyone would be. I recognized the good design when I saw it." And he answered. She tilted her head, studying him. "Is that all it takes to impress you? Good design." Her words lingered, layered with meaning, and he found himself speechless. She left before he could form an answer, her red dress fading into the bustle of the office. In the days that followed, Maya moved swiftly through the firm, establishing herself with a confidence that silenced doubters. She was fearless in meetings, unafraid to question long-standing practices, unwilling to defer simply because others had power. Some found her abrasive, others found her inspiring. Adrian found her impossible to ignore. He caught himself looking for her voice in discussions, seeking her opinion even when he did not need it. The fortress of control he had built around himself began to develop cracks, each widening whenever she was near. One evening, after most had left, Adrian noticed light spilling from Maya's office. Curiosity pulled him toward it. He paused at her door, watching her bent over a scale model, her hands adjusting the miniature walls and beams with meticulous care. "You are here late," he said softly. She looked up, surprised but not startled. "So are you." "Do you need help?" he asked. She hesitated, then nodded. "Actually, yes. The client wants traditional, but they need something more progressive. He stepped inside, standing beside her, close enough to notice the faint scent of her perfume, the curve of her hair falling across her face. "What if you combined both?" he suggested. "A foundation of tradition, expressed through modern forms." She considered this, then adjusted the model, her fingers deft. "Like this?" "Exactly." Their eyes met, and the air between them seemed charged. The walls of professionalism wavered momentarily, replaced by something raw and unspoken. Then Maya straightened, re-establishing distance. "Thank you for your input," she said, her tone brisk. "I should finish this." He nodded, taking the hint. "Good night, Maya." As he left, her image stayed with him. The careful grace of her movements, the fire in her ideas, the way she seemed to exist both within and beyond the boundaries of Northspire. He had known countless designers, brilliant and ambitious, but none had unsettled his foundations in this way. That weekend, Adrian visited his sister, Isabella Cross, for dinner. She was a journalist, sharp-tongued and perceptive, and nothing escaped her. As they ate, she asked about work, about new projects. "We have a new designer," Adrian admitted, "Maya Johnson." Isabella's eyes lit up. "The Maya Johnson? She wrote about her last year, a feature on rising architects of color. She is extraordinary. You should be honored to work with her." Adrian felt a pang of embarrassment. His sister knew more about Maya's achievements than he did. He deflected the conversation, but Isabella's curious glance told him she had noticed the hesitation in his voice. Back at Northspire, the firm prepared for its annual charity gala, which showcases architecture and prestige. This year, Victor announced that Maya's community center design would be the centerpiece, aligning with the firm's charitable mission. Adrian volunteered for tasks he usually avoided, eager for any excuse to involve himself in the preparations. When he asked Maya about her presentation, she raised an eyebrow. "Is this a work meeting or something else?" "A work meeting, of course," he replied too quickly. "Then let us meet in the conference room." She walked ahead, her stride sure, her presence magnetic. He followed, both frustrated and impressed by her insistence on boundaries. Inside, across the polished table, Maya met his gaze with unflinching steadiness. "Why are you so invested in my success?" she asked. He faltered, "I admire your work." "Is that all?" He could not answer. Before he could find the words, Victor entered, interrupting them. But the question lingered in the air, long after she had left, burning in his chest. As the gala approached, Adrian's restlessness deepened. He told himself it was professional pride, concern for the firm's image, but in the quiet of the night he knew better. It was her. It was always her. The night of the gala arrived. The grand ballroom shimmered with crystal chandeliers, and Seattle's elite gathered in elegant attire. Adrian stood among them, his charm polished, his smile practiced, but his eyes never left the entrance. When Maya arrived, the room seemed to dim. She wore a golden gown that clung and flowed in equal measure, her hair swept into an elegant crown of curls, her presence commanding every glance. Conversations faltered, heads turned, and Adrian, who had built his life on unshakable control, felt his carefully constructed composure crumble. For the first time in years, perhaps ever, he was not the center of the room. She was. And though he did not yet understand it, his world had already shifted forever. The gala pulsed with music and conversation, the air heavy with perfume and the faint sweetness of champagne. Servers weaved through the glittering crowd, carrying trays of hors d'oeuvres, while photographers snapped flashes that reflected off sequined gowns and polished cufflinks. Adrian Cross had attended countless events, each a calculated performance of power and elegance, but tonight felt different. His gaze refused to stray far from Maya Johnson, who moved through the ballroom with an almost otherworldly ease. She was surrounded by admirers, colleagues, and clients eager to meet the woman whose design had already made ripples in the industry. Yet she never appeared overwhelmed. Her laughter was genuine, her handshakes firm, her words thoughtful. It was as though she had been born for this stage, though she carried herself with none of the arrogance Adrian often saw in others. Instead, she seemed anchored, self-assured, her confidence rooted in something more profound than approval. Adrian found himself orbiting her, watching from a careful distance. A flicker of acknowledgement crossed her face each time she glanced his way, but it was neither invitation nor dismissal. It left him restless, uncertain. For a man who had built his career on clarity and command, the sensation of uncertainty gnawed at him like an unfamiliar hunger. The evening was well underway when Derek Whitman arrived. Tall, broad-shouldered, his presence carried the effortless swagger of old money. He was Adrian's friend from the exclusive country club, a companion from years of golf, whiskey, and conversations that had often veered into careless territory. Derek spotted Adrian instantly, grinning as he cut through the crowd with a drink in hand. "Adrian, you rogue," Derek said, clapping him on the back. "You never told me the new designer was this stunning." His eyes shifted toward Maya with open appreciation, lingering far too long. Adrian stiffened. "This is Maya Johnson, our civic engagement director," he said, his tone clipped. "Maya, this is Derek Whitman, an old acquaintance." Maya extended her hand politely. "A pleasure to meet you, Mr. Whitman." "The pleasure is mine," Derek replied, his smile lingering in a way that made him feel shy and disrespected. Then, with a sly glance at Adrian, he added, "Though I must admit, I am surprised. Adrian here once told me black women were not his type." The words struck like a blade slicing through velvet silence. Conversations around them faltered, eyes flicked curiously toward the trio. Maya's hand withdrew slowly, her expression cooling, though she remained composed. Adrian's stomach twisted with shame. Derek laughed, oblivious to the weight of his remark. "Just an old joke between friends," he said, "nothing to get worked up about." But Adrian was already unraveling. The memory surged back with brutal clarity. A summer afternoon at the club, Derek teasing him about his dating life, and his careless words tossed into the air without thought. "I do not date black women, not my type." At the time, he had said it with a smirk, seeking approval, deflecting curiosity. He had never imagined those words would rise again like ghosts to stand before him now, when every part of him knew how wrong they had been. Maya's eyes fixed on him, sharp and searching. "Is it true?" she asked softly, but the softness carried a steel blade. Adrian opened his mouth, but no excuse would form. "Yes," he admitted at last, his voice barely audible. "I said it. I was ignorant. I was wrong." "You are looking at me now," Maya said quietly, her tone even, controlled as if I were something new. "But I have always been here. Women like me have always been here. You simply chose not to see." Her words pierced deeper than Derek's careless cruelty. She turned away before Adrian could respond, slipping into the crowd with a grace that made the distance between them feel insurmountable. He wanted to follow, to explain, but something held him back. The truth of his past clung too heavily, the shame too raw. Derek chuckled, oblivious. "Do not look so grim, old friend. Everyone knows preferences are just that, no harm done." Adrian turned on him, fury simmering beneath his polished exterior. "You are a fool, Derek." His words were low, dangerous. For once, Derek looked unsettled, but Adrian did not stay to see. He pushed through the crowd, desperate to find Maya. He spotted her near the stage where Victor Hale prepared to introduce her presentation. She stood poised, her expression calm, though her eyes betrayed the storm within. She walked onto the stage with steady steps, her golden gown shimmering under the lights, and the crowd fell into silence. Her voice carried across the room with clarity and conviction. She spoke of architecture not as monuments, but as vessels of community, of the power of design to connect rather than divide, to heal rather than dominate. She described the Jefferson Civic Center as more than a building. It would be a gathering place, a symbol of inclusion, a heartbeat for its neighborhood. The audience applauded when she finished, many rising to their feet. Adrian clapped, though his chest ached with the weight of what had transpired. He watched her descend from the stage, surrounded by admirers, yet unreachable to him. For the first time in years, perhaps ever, Adrian felt powerless. Later, as the gala continued, he found himself on the terrace outside, the night air cool against his skin. He needed the distance, the quiet. But even here, he could not escape the echo of Maya's words. You simply chose not to see. The terrace door opened, and his sister Isabella stepped out with a glass of champagne. So it is true, she said without preamble. Derek just told me what you said at the club last year. Adrian closed his eyes. I did, he admitted, and I regret it more than anything I have ever said. Isabella's disappointment cut deeper than anger. Our parents raised us better than that. If they were alive, what would they think? He looked at her helplessly. I know, I cannot take it back, but I want to change for her. Then you must prove it, Isabella said firmly, not to Derek or me, but to Maya. Words are nothing now. Only actions will matter. Inside, the music swelled and the gala carried on. Adrian lingered on the terrace, torn between despair and determination. He had spent his life mastering control, shaping his image precisely. Yet one careless sentence from his past threatened to undo it all. But as he thought of Maya standing on that stage, her voice ringing with vision and strength, he realized something he had never admitted to himself before. He did not want to control her. He tried to stand beside her, learn from her, and be worthy of her respect. When the gala ended, he finally saw her across the ballroom. She spoke with Victor Hale, her face composed, her laughter polite. For a moment, her eyes met his. There was no anger, no warmth, only distance. Then she turned away, leaving him with the weight of silence. Adrian walked out into the night, the city lights blurred by drizzle, his reflection distorted in every wet surface. He thought of the tower he had built around himself, of the glass that once seemed unbreakable. Now it felt fragile, each pane etched with cracks. And at the heart of it all was a single truth he could no longer deny. He had spoken words that revealed who he had been, careless, blind, trapped in the privilege of his world. But he was not that man anymore, or at least he no longer wanted to be. The path forward would not be easy. He would have to fight for it, for her, for the man he wished to become. And as he walked alone through the streets of Seattle, the words that had once condemned him became a vow in reverse. He would never again define himself by the narrow blindness of his past. From this night forward, he would see her, honestly, and in seeing her, perhaps find the version of himself that had always waited to emerge. The Monday following the gala was heavy with unspoken tension. The atmosphere inside Northspire was crisp as always, the hum of productivity constant, yet to Adrian Cross it felt as though the tower walls leaned inward, pressing down on him with invisible weight. He moved through the corridors with his usual composure, but behind the mask of discipline, his mind churned restlessly. The words Derek had thrown into the air at the gala had not only fractured his relationship with Maya, but left hairline cracks across his own sense of self. Everywhere he walked, he imagined whispers trailing after him. Did they hear what Derek said? Did they see her face? He could not know for sure, but paranoia gnawed at him. The possibility of weakness felt unbearable for a man whose reputation had always been as unyielding as the steel beams he designed. Yet the thought of losing Maya's respect cut deeper than any professional embarrassment ever had. By mid-morning, he was in the boardroom for a project update meeting. Maya was already seated across the table, her posture elegant, her expression serene. She greeted others with nods and smiles, but when her gaze brushed over him, it carried no warmth, no acknowledgement beyond the most perfunctory courtesy. It was as though he had been reduced to a stranger. The meeting began, and Maya spoke with her characteristic clarity, presenting updates to the Jefferson Civic Center plans. Her ideas flowed effortlessly, weaving architectural innovation with community vision. Even Victor Hale, who rarely showed more than restrained approval, leaned forward with genuine interest. Adrian listened, but every word covered what he had lost. He wanted to speak, contribute, and prove himself worthy again. But each time he opened his mouth, the memory of that night tightened his throat. After the meeting, he lingered, waiting until the others left. Maya gathered her papers with calm precision. "Maya," he said finally, his voice low. She paused, her eyes lifting to his without hesitation. "Yes, Adrian, I need to apologize again. What Derek said, what I said years ago, it was ignorant, cruel, thoughtless. I cannot erase it, but I need you to know I am not that man anymore.
Her expression remained steady, but there was steel beneath her calm. People often say they have changed, Adrian. But change is not a declaration. It is proof. What proof do you offer me? The question landed like a stone in his chest. He opened his mouth but found no answer ready.
She did not wait. She tucked the last of her notes into her folder and left the room with quiet dignity, leaving him staring after her, his heart heavy with the truth of her words. The rest of the week unfolded with similar fractures. At lunch in the executive dining room, a few partners made veiled comments about the gala, their tones light but edged. Adrian's mother, Margaret Cross, called him from her estate one evening. "I heard whispers about your new colleague. You need to be careful, Adrian. Appearances matter. The Cross legacy cannot be tangled in unnecessary controversy." Her words were knives wrapped in velvet. She spoke not with malice but with the cool detachment of a woman who had spent her life preserving image above all else. Adrian listened, his jaw tightening with each syllable. When she finished, he said only, "Thank you for your concern, Mother." But when the call ended, anger seethed beneath his controlled exterior. For once, he did not want to protect legacy. He wanted to preserve the truth. On Friday, the leadership team gathered to review a contract proposal with Henderson Global, one of Northspire's most valuable clients. The Henderson executives were cautious men, obsessed with stability and reputation. During the presentation, one of them, a silver-haired man named William Grafton, made an offhand remark. "I trust your firm maintains the professionalism we value." There was quite a stir at the gala, whispers about personal entanglements. The implication was clear. Adrian's pulse hammered in his ears, but Victor Hale smoothly redirected the conversation before he could speak, assuring the Henderson team of Northspire's reliability. Yet the damage was done. Adrian saw the subtle shift in their posture, the slight edge of doubt. For the first time in years, a client's confidence in him had wavered, not because of his work, but because of perception. As the sun sank behind the skyline that evening, Adrian remained in his office long after others had gone. The city below glittered with life, but his reflection in the glass seemed hollow. He thought of Maya's question, "What proof do you offer me?" He had none. Words would not suffice. He would have to risk everything if he wanted to regain her trust. The following week offered him that chance. Jefferson had scheduled a community forum to discuss the Civic Center project. It was meant to be a symbolic gesture, an opportunity to present designs to the people using the space. Traditionally, such forums were treated as mere formalities. But for Maya, it was more than that. She prepared tirelessly, crafting slides highlighting inclusivity and rehearsing answers to questions she anticipated from skeptical residents. When the evening arrived, the community hall was packed. Families, shop owners, students, and elders filled the rows of chairs, their expressions wary yet hopeful. Maya stood at the front, radiant with purpose, her voice carrying warmth and authority as she presented the design. The audience listened, nodding, murmuring among themselves, but when questions began, doubt surfaced. "Will this building really be for us, or just for outsiders?" one man asked. Another added question, "How do we know you will not cut corners and forget our needs once construction begins?" The skepticism was sharp, rooted in years of disappointment with promises never kept. Maya answered with patience, addressing concerns with empathy and specifics. But the crowd's mistrust was deep, and Adrian could see the weight pressing on her shoulders. In that moment, he realized this was his proof. He rose from his seat, moving to stand beside her. "Ladies and gentlemen," Adrian said, his voice steady but charged with conviction. "I am Adrian Cross, lead architect on this project. You do not know me, but I know what it is to inherit walls built for power rather than people. For years, I designed monuments to image, not to life. But Maya Johnson opened my eyes. She reminded me that architecture is not about legacy, it is about community." The room fell silent. Adrian continued, "I give you my word that this building will not be a hollow monument. It will be a place for you, for your families, for generations. Hold me accountable. If I fail, let my name bear the weight of that failure." the crowd murmured. Then applause began to ripple, growing louder until it filled the hall. Maya looked at him, her eyes unreadable, but there was something softer than before. Perhaps not forgiveness, but recognition, that he was willing to stand beside her rather than above her. Later, as they packed their materials, Maya approached him quietly. "That was brave," she said. "Reckless perhaps, but courageous." He met her gaze, his voice low. "I am done living in the shadows of the man I used to be. I want to build something real, Maya, not just with architecture, with my life." She did not answer, but the faintest flicker of warmth touched her eyes before she turned away. For Adrian, it was enough. It was not absolution yet, but the first fracture was repaired, a sign that change was possible. As he left the community hall, the night air felt lighter. The path ahead would be steep, filled with resistance from colleagues, clients, and even his own family. But for the first time, Adrian did not feel imprisoned by the glass tower he had built. He felt the possibility of stepping outside it, of creating something lasting not through perfection, but through truth. And at the center of that possibility was Maya Johnson, the woman who had forced him to see the cracks in his walls and the light that poured through them. The city glimmered beneath a cold drizzle as Adrian Cross drove back from the community forum, his hands tightening on the wheel, his mind racing with every word he had spoken. He had exposed himself in a way he never had before, casting aside the armor of control that had always shielded him. For a man raised in the shadow of legacy, in a family where vulnerability was equated with weakness, the experience felt at once terrifying and liberating. Yet as the applause of the Jefferson residents replayed in his mind, he knew it had not been about him. It had been about her. Maya Johnson had been the one to ignite that fire. Without her, he would still be designing lifeless towers and mistaking them for triumphs. When he finally reached his apartment, the silence pressed against him. The glass walls framed a view of the Sound, fog curling over the water. He poured himself a drink but left it untouched, pacing across the polished floor instead. Every memory of Maya sharpened with the night's events. The steadiness of her voice, the strength in her presence, the way she had looked at him afterward with the faintest flicker of something he could not yet name. Hope, perhaps, but he was too restless to sleep, too haunted by the awareness that proving himself to her would take more than one public gesture. Hours stretched into dawn, and still he did not rest. When he arrived at North Spire the next morning, his face betrayed the exhaustion. He caught a glimpse of himself in the mirrored elevator wall, his tie slightly askew, shadows beneath his eyes. It was an unfamiliar sight for a man who prided himself on immaculate control. The day began with another series of meetings with the Henderson Global team. Their skepticism after the gala had not abated, and Adrian knew they were testing him. In the boardroom, their questions were sharp, pointed, and probing for weakness. "Why adjust the design now?" one executive asked. "Are these community additions practical or sentimental?" Adrian straightened his shoulders. "They are essential," he said firmly. "A building that fails its people fails its purpose. If you are looking for a hollow monument, you have chosen the wrong firm." His words hung heavy in the air. The executives exchanged glances, and one of them scribbled a note. When the meeting ended, Victor Hale approached him privately. "You are playing a dangerous game, Adrian," Victor warned. "Henderson is our most lucrative client. They do not appreciate being challenged." Adrian met his gaze with quiet resolve. "I would rather lose them than lose the soul of what we are building." Victor studied him for a long moment, then sighed. "I hope you know what you are risking." By late afternoon, whispers had already spread through the office. Some admired Adrian's stance, others murmured about recklessness. Maya, meanwhile, remained composed and focused on her work. Yet Adrian noticed her glances toward him, small, fleeting, as though she were weighing what she had seen in Jefferson against the history she could not forget. That evening, as the office emptied, Adrian saw her still at her desk, reviewing drawings beneath the glow of a desk lamp. He hesitated at her door. "May I?" he asked softly. She looked up, surprised but not unwelcoming, and nodded. He stepped inside, the silence between them thick with everything unspoken. "I know I cannot undo the past," he said. "I cannot erase those words. But I want to be better. I want to prove that I can see, truly see, beyond the blindness I once carried." Maya set down her pen, her gaze steady. "Do you know what it means to see truly, Adrian? It is not about admiration. It is not about saying the right things when the world is watching. It is about living differently when no one is there to applaud." Her words cut deep because they were true. He nodded slowly. "Then give me the chance to live differently. Not for appearances, not for the firm, for us." Her eyes flickered at the word as though the possibility of us both intrigued and frightened her. She stood gathering her things. "It is not my forgiveness you should seek first," she said quietly. "It is your own." With that, she left him alone in the office, the echo of her words lingering long after her footsteps faded. That night became another long vigil for Adrian. Sleep eluded him as questions churned in his mind. What did it mean to forgive himself? Could he ever escape the shadow of his upbringing, the weight of careless privilege that had shaped him? He remembered conversations at the club, family dinners, and boardrooms, where prejudices had been disguised as jokes, traditions, and unspoken rules. He had never challenged them, not until Maya. In the early hours, he drove aimlessly through the city, the streets slick with rain. He passed neighborhoods where his buildings loomed like cold guardians, towering structures that looked impressive from a distance, but gave nothing to the people below. For the first time, he felt ashamed of them. He realized he had built monuments to himself, not sanctuaries for others, and the realization hollowed him. He parked near the Jefferson neighborhood, the site of the future Civic Center. The streets were quiet, storefronts shuttered, streetlights casting long pools of light. He walked alone, imagining the plaza Maya had sketched, the laughter of children on the steps, the hum of markets and music filling the space. He saw not steel and glass, but life, connection, warmth. For the first time, he understood what she had meant. The following morning, he returned to the office with a different energy. Exhaustion clung to him, but beneath it burned determination. He called his design team together and announced changes. "We are reworking the Jefferson Civic Center. Every element will serve the community, not just the skyline." No one argued. They could feel the shift in him. When Maya arrived, she was surprised to see the new sketches spread across the table. She studied them in silence, her expression unreadable. At last, she looked at him. "You mean it?" she said. "Yes," he replied, "I do." Her gaze softened, just slightly, and in that moment, Adrian felt a fragile thread of hope binding them again. That night, however, another call came, this time from his mother. "Adrian," Margaret Cross said, her voice cool as glass, "word has reached me that you are making reckless decisions. Clients are displeased. The Cross name is at stake. Do not forget who you are." Adrian closed his eyes. For the first time, he answered without hesitation. "I know exactly who I am, Mother, and for once it is not who you raised me to be." The silence on the line was sharp, cutting, but he did not retreat. When he hung up, he felt both dread and freedom. He knew more storms were coming, from clients, family, and within the firm itself. But he also knew the path forward. Adrian stood by his apartment window as the city settled into another long night, watching the rain streak down the glass. The man who had once built walls of steel and silence was gone. In his place stood a man determined to make something living, something true. And though Maya's forgiveness was not yet his, he knew the only way to earn it was to keep walking this path, no matter how long or dark the night became. The annual North Spire Gala was meant to be a celebration of triumph. It was the event where the city's elite gathered to toast success, where clients were courted and rivals subdued beneath the weight of grandeur. It had always been a predictable ritual for Adrian Cross, a stage where his polished charm and flawless image served as armor. Yet this year, as he stepped into the ballroom shimmering with crystal chandeliers and golden drapery, he felt the weight of shadows pressing down on him. The evening had barely begun, but whispers already curled through the room like smoke. Rumors of Henderson Global's dissatisfaction had reached eager ears, and more than one conversation faltered when Adrian passed. He carried himself with the same precision as always, his suit immaculate, his gaze steady, but he could feel the difference. Respect was still present, but it was edged with doubt. Maya Johnson was already there, radiant in emerald silk that caught the light with every movement. She stood surrounded by a circle of admirers, her laughter warm, her eyes alive. She did not seek attention, but attention gravitated toward her. Adrian could not look away. She was more than a presence in the room, she was the heartbeat of it. Yet the memory of Derek's careless words, the reminder of his own past arrogance, still stood like a wall between them. He went through the throng, offering polite nods and handshakes, though his focus remained fixed on her. At last, their paths crossed, and they stood face to face momentarily. "Good evening, Maya," he said quietly. She inclined her head with professional grace. "Good evening, Adrian." Her tone was calm and courteous, but distant, and the space between them was vast despite their closeness. Before he could say more, Victor Hale called the room to attention. "Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we celebrate North Spire's legacy and its future. It is my honor to present the design for the Jefferson Civic Center, led by our newest visionary, Maya Johnson." Applause swept the room as Maya stepped onto the stage. Adrian watched as she spoke with the same eloquence he had witnessed in Jefferson, her voice weaving together vision and purpose. She painted a picture of community, inclusion, and architecture that belonged to the wealthy and everyone. The audience leaned in, captivated. Adrian felt small for the first time in years, not diminished, but humbled by the realization that her vision was greater than any he had ever dared to pursue. Yet not everyone was moved. From his vantage point, Adrian caught the narrowed eyes of William Grafton, Henderson's representative, whispering to another executive. Their expressions were skeptical, their applause lukewarm. The message was clear. Henderson did not share Maya's vision. By extension, they did not share Adrian's newfound commitment to it. After the presentation, the ballroom erupted into conversation. Maya was pulled into a flurry of congratulations, her name on everyone's lips. Adrian lingered at the edge, torn between pride and fear. He knew what was coming. Henderson would not stay silent for long. He did not have to wait. An hour later, as guests mingled over champagne, Grafton approached him with cold precision. "Mr. Cross, a word." Adrian followed him to a quieter corner, the music and laughter fading into the background. "Henderson is reconsidering its partnership," Grafton said bluntly. "Your firm has consistently delivered monuments of prestige. Now you propose a community playground? That is not what we pay for." Adrian's jaw tightened. "The Civic Center is more than a building. It will define the future of Jefferson. It will define the future of this city." Grafton's eyes were icy. "Henderson is not interested in sentimental experiments. Either you return to the North Spire we trusted, or we withdraw." The threat hung in the air like a blade. Adrian felt the old instincts stir, the impulse to compromise, preserve profit, and protect legacy at all costs. But then he thought of Maya, her steady eyes as she spoke of belonging, and the people in Jefferson applauding when he promised accountability. He could not retreat now. "Then withdraw," he said quietly. "Henderson deserves a firm that shares its vision. North Spire is no longer that firm." Grafton's expression hardened, but he did not argue. "Very well, you will regret this." He left without another word. When Adrian returned to the ballroom, Victor Hale was waiting, his face pale with restrained fury. "Do you understand what you have done? Henderson represents half of our projected revenue this year. Without them, the board will demand answers." Adrian met his gaze unflinching. "Then I will give them answers. I will not betray what we have built with Maya." Victor stared at him for a long moment, then shook his head. "You are either the bravest man in this room or the most reckless. Time will tell which." As the night wore on, Adrian's isolation grew. Conversations dimmed when he approached, clients avoided his eyes, and whispers spread faster than champagne. Yet through it all, Maya remained a steady presence. She left the room respectfully, offering smiles and thanks, never faltering. But when her gaze brushed over him, he thought he saw something different. Something not quite forgiveness, but recognition of his stand. Near midnight, as the gala thinned, Adrian stepped onto the balcony for air. The city stretched below, its lights blurred by mist. He felt the weight of what he had sacrificed, the enormity of what lay ahead. The Henderson withdrawal would shake Northspire to its core. The board would call for his head. His mother would unleash her disapproval with all the force of tradition. Yet for the first time in his career, Adrian did not feel hollow. He felt alive. Footsteps sounded behind him. Maya joined him on the balcony, her gown catching the faint glow of the city lights. For a long moment they stood in silence, the night air cool against their skin. "You turned down Henderson," she said finally. It was not a question. "Yes," Adrian replied. "I will not build empty towers anymore." She studied him, her eyes searching. "Do you know what that choice means?" "I do," he said. "It means loss. It means struggle. But it also means truth." She looked away, her gaze sweeping over the city. When she spoke again, her voice was softer. "People rarely choose truth when power is on the line. Perhaps you are not the man I thought you were." Adrian's chest tightened. "Then let me prove that to you every day until there is no doubt." She did not answer, but the silence between them was different now. Not cold, not final. It was a silence alive with possibility. Adrian remained when she left the balcony, the city stretching before him. The night was still heavy with shadows, but somewhere beyond the mist, a faint light stirred. It was fragile, uncertain, but it was enough to guide him forward. For the first time, Adrian understood that this battle was not about clients, contracts, or even reputation. It was about building something greater than himself, something that could outlast towers of steel and legacies of power. And in that realization, Adrian Cross felt the first true glimmer of redemption amidst the gala of shadows. Morning light spilled into Adrian's office through the vast glass windows, but instead of clarity, it brought unease. The city below pulsed with its usual rhythm, yet inside Northspire, the air felt tense, brittle, like glass stretched to the brink of shattering. The Henderson withdrawal had not taken long to make waves. When Adrian reached his desk, a flurry of emails awaited him, each subject line more urgent than the last. The board wanted an emergency meeting. Investors demanded reassurance. Employees whispered in hallways with uncertainty in their voices. Adrian read the messages one by one, his jaw tightening. For years, he had defined himself as the unshakable pillar of Northspire, calm, decisive, untouchable. But now, cracks spread through that image. He had chosen principle over profit, conviction over compliance, and though his heart told him it was right, the cost was mounting faster than he had anticipated. The knock on his door was sharp, impatient. Without waiting for permission, Victor Hale entered. His expression carried the strain of a man balancing diplomacy with frustration. Victor said, "We have less than 48 hours before the board convenes," setting a thick folder onto the desk. "And they're coming for your head." Adrian leaned back in his chair, studying the folder without opening it. "Let them." Victor's eyes narrowed. "Don't play the martyr. You know what losing Henderson means. It isn't just revenue, it's reputation. Others will follow once word spreads that Northspire can't retain its largest client. And if we'd bent to Henderson's prejudice, what then?" Adrian countered. "What reputation would we have kept? That we trade integrity for contracts?" Victor sighed heavily, pacing the length of the office. "I admire your conviction, Adrian, I do. But conviction doesn't pay salaries. It doesn't fund projects. The board doesn't care about moral victories. They care about numbers." Adrian finally opened the folder. Charts, projections, loss estimates. They painted a grim picture. But beneath the fear, Adrian sensed opportunity. If Henderson was gone, perhaps it was the space Northspire needed to redefine itself. Before he could respond, another knock sounded. This time it was Maya, standing in the doorway with a calmness that contrasted sharply with the storm inside. "May I come in?" Victor gestured toward her, his frustration spilling over. "You could talk some sense into him. He thinks Henderson's departure is a badge of honor." Maya entered, her presence steadying the room. She met Victor's gaze with quiet firmness. Sometimes honor is all that keeps us from losing ourselves entirely. Victor shook his head. Idealism is a luxury, Miss Johnson. When this firm collapses, will honor rebuild it? Maya did not flinch. Innovation will. Integrity will. Those are stronger foundations than fear. Victor muttered something under his breath and left, the door clicking shut behind him. Silence stretched before Maya crossed the room to face Adrian. He looked at her, searching for judgment, for disappointment, but found neither. You took a risk, she said. The kind of risk that changes things, or destroys them, Adrian replied. Sometimes both, Maya countered softly. He wanted to believe her, but doubt pressed hard against his resolve. What if he had doomed them both? What if his choices ruined not just his career, but hers as well? The boardroom was a battlefield 2 days later. Adrian sat at the head of the long mahogany table, facing a dozen pairs of eyes filled with accusation. Victor sat to his right, arms crossed, his earlier words lingering like smoke. The chairman, an older man named Lawrence Pierce, wasted no time. Adrian, we entrusted you with this firm's future. Explain why Henderson Global, our most valuable client, is walking away. Because they demanded that we compromise our values, Adrian replied evenly. They wanted us to reject innovation, to silence Maya Johnson's vision for the Civic Center, and to reduce our work to shallow monuments. I refused. The room erupted in murmurs. One board member, a woman named Evelyn Sharp, leaned forward. Do you expect us to applaud you for becoming a moral philosopher while our revenue evaporates? I expect you to recognize that Henderson's money came with strings that would strangle Northspire's potential, Adrian said. If we want to be leaders, not followers, we must build with courage. Lawrence Pierce's gaze hardened. Courage doesn't pay dividends. We will lose investors, employees, everything we've built. Then perhaps what we've built needs to change, Adrian shocked back. For too long, Northspire has served the few. It's time we serve the many. The tension was thick enough to choke on. Evelyn Sharp slammed her hand on the table. Enough of this nonsense. Adrian, you've lost perspective. I motion for a vote of no confidence. The words hung like a blade poised to fall. But before the chairman could call for the vote, Maya stood. She had been seated quietly at the end of the table, but now her voice cut through the room with unexpected force. If you remove Adrian, you don't just lose a partner. You lose the Jefferson Civic Center. You lose the trust of the communities watching Northspire. You lose the chance to lead the future of architecture instead of clinging to the past. Her words stunned the board into silence. She continued, her voice steady, her eyes fierce. I've seen what happens when firms chase prestige at the expense of people. They become hollow, forgotten. Adrian Cross is not perfect, but he is willing to change. He is willing to build something new. If Northspire cannot see that value, then perhaps Northspire itself is obsolete. Whispers surged around the table, but Adrian heard only the pounding of his own heart. Maya had not defended him personally. She had defended the vision they had begun together. Lawrence Pierce's expression softened, though only slightly. Bold words, Miss Johnson. But passion does not balance ledgers. Then balance them differently, Adrian said. Henderson is gone, but we can pursue new partnerships, progressive firms, community organizations, even the city council. The Jefferson project is already attracting attention. We can leverage that momentum. The board exchanged glances, their certainty fractured. After a long pause, Lawrence spoke. Very well, we will postpone the vote. But Adrian, you will step down if your vision does not yield results within 6 months. Agreed? Adrian met his gaze, then nodded. Agreed. The meeting adjourned, leaving Adrian drained but unbroken. As the others filed out, Maya lingered. 6 months, she said quietly. That isn't much time. It will be enough, Adrian replied, though uncertainty gnawed at him. That evening, he found himself walking through Jefferson again, the skeletal frame of the Civic Center rising against the skyline. The community buzzed with anticipation, children playing near the site, and elders watching with cautious hope. Maya joined him, her gaze sweeping over the scene. They believe in this place, she said softly. "Do you?" Adrian asked. Maya turned to him, her eyes unwavering. "I believe in what it can be, and I believe in what you're trying to become. But belief isn't enough, Adrian. You have to live it every day." He nodded, feeling the truth of her words settle deep within him. The breaking point had come, and though the fracture lines were visible, he was still standing. From those cracks, something new could emerge. Walking together through the twilight, Adrian realized the fight was no longer about survival. It was about transformation. The old North Spire was dying, and something uncertain and fragile but alive was struggling to be born in its place. And for the first time, Adrian welcomed the uncertainty. The Royce estate sat like a monument to another world, set against the tranquil shimmer of Lake Washington. The mansion was a study in timeless elegance, every stone and archway bearing the mark of wealth carefully preserved across generations. It had once been a sanctuary for Adrian, a reminder of everything he was meant to inherit. Now, as he guided his car up the winding driveway, it felt like a citadel of expectations waiting to crush him. Inside, his mother awaited. Eleanor Royce had always been formidable. Her posture was perfect, her words measured, her presence commanding in a way that silenced even the most defiant voices. She greeted Adrian with a calm smile, her gray eyes sharp as steel. She said the Henderson contract is gone, leading him into the parlor without preamble. Adrian followed, the weight of her words pressing against his chest. "Yes, I refused their conditions." Conditions. Eleanor poured tea with the precision of ritual. Or was it an ultimatum? The Hendersons are practical people. They do not make unreasonable demands. They demanded conformity, Adrian replied. They wanted us to abandon the Civic Center vision. They wanted us to silence Maya Johnson. At the mention of Maya's name, Eleanor's brow arched. "So this is about her." "It's about integrity," Adrian countered, though the heat in his tone betrayed how deeply Maya was entwined with his choices. Eleanor set the teapot down with a delicate clink. "Integrity does not keep this house standing. It does not protect the hundreds of employees who depend on North Spire's stability. Your father built this firm with his blood and discipline. Do you think he would have thrown it away for sentiment?" The mention of his father struck a raw chord. Adrian remembered long nights at the drafting table, his father's stern hand guiding his own, the lessons drilled into him about precision, strength, and the primacy of reputation. His father had been a titan in architecture, revered and feared, yet always tethered to tradition. "I don't know what father would have done," Adrian admitted, "but I know what I must do." Eleanor studied him with a mixture of exasperation and reluctant respect. "You are my son, you carry the Royce name. That name has never bent to passing fashions or reckless idealism. Do not make me watch you destroy it." The silence followed was heavy, the air thick with history and expectation. Adrian broke it with a quiet resolve. The Royce name will mean more when it stands for something beyond privilege. Eleanor's lips pressed into a thin line. "You are gambling with a legacy that took generations to build." "Then let me build a new one," Adrian said. "One that does not crumble under the weight of prejudice." Her eyes flickered, anger, fear, perhaps even a trace of pride, but she did not answer. Instead, she dismissed him with a wave of her hand. "Go then, chase your vision, but remember, Adrian, legacies are not easily remade. They are broken more often than they are reborn." He left the estate feeling both heavier and lighter. His mother's words clung like chains, but beneath them, something fierce stirred. Perhaps he could build something new, not just for himself, but for everyone who the weight of names and traditions had ever silenced. The following week, the city buzzed with news of Henderson's withdrawal. Articles speculated on North Spire's collapse, critics called Adrian reckless, and whispers spread through Seattle's elite circles. Yet in Jefferson, the story was different. Community leaders praised North Spire's courage. Young architects sent letters, thanking Adrian and Maya for proving that ideals had a place in design. Maya was tireless, pouring energy into the Civic Center, meeting with residents, refining designs late into the night. Adrian watched her with admiration and unease. She carried the project gracefully, but he knew the scrutiny weighed on her too. Every headline that mentioned his name inevitably tied hers to controversy. One evening, as they reviewed blueprints in her office, he noticed the faint slump in her shoulders. "You're exhausted," he said. "I'm fine," Maya replied, though her voice lacked conviction. "You shouldn't have to bear all this." She looked up, her eyes steady despite the weariness. "I knew what I was walking into, but Adrian, if you're going to stand with me, you have to understand. It isn't just about one project, it's about changing an entire system." He reached across the table, his hand brushing hers. "Then we'll change it together." Her fingers lingered on his momentarily before she pulled back, returning to the plans. "Then prove it, not with words, with actions." The opportunity came sooner than expected. The following week, developers presented their cases for new contracts. At the city council hearing, the chamber was tense when it was Northspire's turn. Henderson's allies had already spoken, casting doubt on Adrian's leadership. Maya presented first, her voice unwavering as she described the Jefferson Civic Center. She spoke of public plazas, cultural festivals, safe spaces for children, and opportunities for local businesses. The council members listened. Some were skeptical, and others visibly moved. Then Adrian rose. "For years," he began, "Northspire built towers that touched the clouds but ignored the streets below. We measured success by height and glass, not by the lives within. That ends today. The Jefferson Civic Center is not a charity, it is not sentiment. It is the blueprint of our future." He spoke not as the polished heir of the Royce legacy, but as a man stripped bare of illusion. He admitted past arrogance, acknowledged blind spots, and promised transformation. By the time he finished, the chamber was silent. A councilwoman finally spoke. "Mr. Cross, are you prepared for the backlash this will bring?" Adrian met her gaze. "I already am." The vote that followed was not unanimous, but it was decisive. The council approved Northspire's leadership of the Civic Center and extended consideration for 2 additional community projects. It was a lifeline, fragile but real. Outside the chamber, reporters swarmed. Questions flew about Henderson, Maya, and the future of Northspire. For once, Adrian did not dodge. He stood beside Maya, his answers clear, his stance unshaken. Later that night, alone in his apartment, he sat with a glass of whiskey and thought of his father. He imagined the disappointment that might have been there, the anger at abandoning clients like Henderson. But he also imagined something else, a sliver of pride that his son had found courage his father had never dared to claim. The weight of legacy still pressed on him, but now it was different. No longer chains to bind him, but stone to carve anew. The name Royce would not vanish, but perhaps it could mean something more. When Maya called him later, her voice was tired but warm, and he felt the truth. "We made progress today," she said. "Yes," Adrian replied, "but it's only the beginning." In the silence that followed, he realized the breaking point was behind him. What lay ahead was harder, but it was also brighter. And for the first time, he was ready to carry the weight of legacy and the responsibility of reshaping it. The weeks that followed the council hearing were a blur of motion. The Jefferson Civic Center gained momentum, the steel frame rising from the ground like a promise to the neighborhood. Maya was everywhere at once, meeting with community leaders, overseeing site inspections, and adjusting designs with tireless precision. Adrian watched her work and felt both pride and fear. Pride in her brilliance, fear in the relentless scrutiny surrounding them. Not everyone celebrated Northspire's direction. Old allies drifted away, citing uncertainty. A few prominent magazines published scathing critiques of Adrian's leadership, portraying him as reckless, a privileged man playing savior. Rumors spread that other firms were circling, eager to poach Northspire's clients. Inside the company, the atmosphere grew taut, the weight of Henderson's departure still pulling at morale. One evening, Adrian stayed late at the office, the city glittering outside his window. His phone buzzed with a message from his mother. "Dinner tomorrow. No excuses." He set the phone down, rubbing his temples. He knew what the dinner meant. Eleanor would not remain silent. The next day, the Royce estate was lit like a cathedral, chandeliers casting golden light across polished wood. Eleanor sat at the head of the long dining table, immaculate as ever. To Adrian's surprise, his sister Evelyn was present too, her sharp eyes studying him with quiet intensity. "Mother," he greeted, inclining his head. "Sit," Eleanor said, her tone clipped. "We need to talk about the fire you've started." Adrian obeyed, folding his hands as the servants retreated. Eleanor's gaze was cold steel. "You are tearing this family's legacy apart. Henderson's withdrawal is only the beginning. Investors whisper, clients hesitate, and you parade this new vision as if ideals alone will sustain us." Adrian met her eyes. "Ideals are the foundation. Without them, all we have is hollow glass." "And this woman," Eleanor pressed, her voice tightening, "Maya Johnson, do not think I see her influence. She has bewitched you into betraying your own name." Adrian's pulse quickened, but his voice stayed calm. "Maya hasn't bewitched me. She's awakened me. She's shown me what architecture can mean beyond ego and profit." Eleanor's hand clenched around her wineglass. "Your father would never have tolerated this weakness." Adrian's voice sharpened. "Then perhaps father was wrong." The silence that followed was a thunderclap. Eleanor's eyes flashed with fury, Evelyn's widened with shock. For a moment, Adrian thought his mother might strike him with words so sharp they would scar, but she only drew a slow breath and set down her glass. "You disgrace us," she whispered. Evelyn spoke then, her voice cool but laced with curiosity. "Or maybe he frees us. Northspire cannot survive by clinging to the past." Eleanor shot her daughter a glare, but Evelyn continued. "Admit it, mother, the world is changing. Adrian sees it. You refuse to." The fracture in the family widened across the table. Adrian rose, his chair scraping against marble. "I will not apologize for trying to build something better." Eleanor's voice cut like a blade. "Then do it without the Royce name." The word struck him harder than he expected. Stripped of the name, cast adrift from the legacy he had been born to carry, yet as he left the estate that night, the fire inside him only burned brighter. If he had to build without the Royce name, so be it. He would forge his own. The next day brought another battle. At the Jefferson site, a group of protesters gathered outside the fencing. They carried signs that read, "Stop social experiments" and "Protect our neighborhood." Their chants grew louder as news cameras arrived. Maya approached them calmly, but Adrian could see the tightness in her jaw. "We're here to listen," Maya told the protesters. "This project belongs to the community. Tell us your concerns." An older man at the front sneered. "You say it's for us, but it's just a stunt. You're using us for your reputation." Maya held her ground. "We're building something together." The crowd jeered, their anger swelling. Adrian stepped forward, his voice carrying. "We're not here to impose. We're here to serve. Judge us not by headlines, but by what rises from this ground." Some listened, others did not. Tension sparked, the cameras capturing every moment. In the end, the protesters dispersed, but the damage lingered. That night, headlines framed the Civic Center as a battlefield of ideals, the firestorm of public opinion raging hotter than ever. Back at Northspire, Victor confronted Adrian. "You've put us in the center of a war we can't win." "Then we fight differently," Adrian replied. "Not with spin, but with proof. When the Civic Center opens, it will silence every doubt." Victor shook his head. "You gambled too much." But beneath his frustration was something else, reluctant respect. As the weeks stretched, the flames of scrutiny only grew. Anonymous op-eds questioned Adrian's motives. Anonymous donors withdrew support. At the same time, new voices rallied around Northspire. Students, community leaders, young architects. They wrote letters, posted online, declaring the project a beacon of hope. Adrian stood at the center, pulled between fire and flame. Some nights he doubted everything, wondering if his mother had been right, if he was tearing down a legacy only to leave ashes behind. But then he would walk with Maya through Jefferson, see the children pressing their faces to the fences, hear the elders talking about future festivals in the plaza, and his resolve would return. As rain streaked the office windows one night, Maya found him staring at the city. "You can't fight everyone," she said gently. "I don't need to fight everyone," Adrian replied. "Just long enough to build something no one can deny." Maya's eyes softened. "And if it burns you in the process, then let it," Adrian said. "Better to burn than to rust." The words hung between them, fierce and fragile. For the first time, Maya stepped closer, her hand brushing his. "Then let's make sure what we build is worth the fire." He met her gaze, the weight of her words steadying him more than any boardroom could. In that moment, amidst the fractures and flames, Adrian Cross knew that though the world around him threatened to break, something unshakable was being forged within. The city could jeer, his mother could rage, and the board could threaten to collapse. But the Civic Center rose higher each day, and with it grew the faint outline of a future built not on fear, but on fire transformed into light. The storm broke on a Monday morning. For weeks, the fractures had deepened, clients whispering of instability, investors wavering, the press circling like vultures. But now the weight of it all came crashing down. At dawn, Adrian received the message. The board had called an emergency session. The subject line was stark and final: vote of removal. He stood in his apartment, staring at the words, the city beyond his glass walls blurred by rain. It was not unexpected, but the reality still struck hard. 6 months had not yet passed, but Henderson's absence, the protests, and the unrelenting fire of public scrutiny had given his enemies their opening. By 9 o'clock, the boardroom was packed. The atmosphere was heavy, the air taut with anticipation. Lawrence Pierce sat at the head, his gavel resting on the polished wood like a weapon waiting to fall. Beside him, Evelyn Sharp smirked faintly, her eyes gleaming with triumph. Adrian entered with measured steps, his suit impeccable despite the storm inside him. Maya followed, not as a silent observer, but as his partner in the fight. Her presence steadied him, her calm countering the hostility radiating from the table. Pierce wasted no time. "Adrian Cross," he said, his voice carrying the weight of authority, "you stand accused of dereliction of duty. You jeopardized Northspire's financial stability by severing ties with Henderson Global. You have endangered this firm's legacy with reckless decisions. Today, we will decide whether you remain at the helm." Evelyn Sharp leaned forward, her voice sharp as a knife. "Mr. Cross has forgotten his duty to profit. He has traded decades of prestige for social experiments that will bankrupt us. I move for immediate removal." The motion was seconded swiftly, murmurs rippling around the table. Adrian stood, his gaze sweeping the room. "I built towers that reached the sky for years but never touched the ground. I chased prestige, not purpose. And yes, Henderson is gone. But ask yourselves, was Henderson truly Northspire's future? Or were they the anchor dragging us into irrelevance?" He gestured toward Maya. "Look at what we have achieved with the Jefferson Civic Center. For the first time, the City Council considers Northspire not a relic of the elite, but a partner in progress. For the first time, communities that never trusted us believe we are building for them. That is the future." Evelyn's voice dripped with disdain. "Romantic words, but buildings are not built on dreams. They are built on contracts. Where are your contracts, Adrian?" Before Adrian could respond, Maya rose. "They are here," she said firmly, holding up a folder. She placed it on the table, opening it with calm precision. Inside were letters of intent from the council for 2 additional community projects, signed just days earlier. Funding proposals from progressive investors eager to back sustainable design. Partnerships with local businesses are tied to the Civic Center's plaza. The room fell silent as she slid the documents across the table. "Northspire is not collapsing," Maya said. "It is transforming. And if you remove Adrian now, you sever the future these contracts represent." Whispers surged again, but this time they carried doubt, hesitation. Lawrence Pierce studied the documents, his stern face unreadable. Evelyn Sharp's smirk faltered. Adrian seized the moment. "You say I endangered this firm. Perhaps I did. But what is the greater danger, risking change or clinging to decay? Henderson left because they feared progress. I will not apologize for refusing to kneel." The silence was electric. Finally, Pierce spoke. "We will vote." The roll call began, each name a drumbeat of fate. Evelyn voted for removal, her voice sharp. Another followed. Then, others voted to retain him individually, swayed by Maya's contracts and Adrian's conviction. The tally hung on the final vote, Pierce himself. The chairman's gaze swept the room, then settled on Adrian. "You have risked everything," he said slowly, perhaps recklessly, "but I have seen firms die of cowardice as often as of ambition." He set down the gavel. "I vote to retain." The result was clear. Adrian remained. The motion for removal had failed. Leaf washed through him, but it was tempered by exhaustion. He knew the war was not over. The board would watch him like hawks. The press would continue their assaults. His mother's disapproval would sharpen into open fury. But for now, he had won a reprieve. When the meeting ended, Maya joined him in the corridor. "You held the line," she said quietly. "We held it together," Adrian replied. "Without you, I would have fallen." For a moment, the walls between them thinned. She looked at him with something softer than before, something almost tender. But then she straightened. "This is only the beginning, Adrian. The trial is not over." That evening he returned to Jefferson. The Civic Center's skeleton rose against the dusk, cranes looming like sentinels. The air was filled with the clang of steel, the hum of machinery, and the voices of workers shouting across scaffolds. It was chaos, but it was life. Adrian walked the site, running his hand along the steel beams, grounding himself in the tangible. As he stood there, a group of children approached the fence, their eyes wide as they watched the building take shape. One boy called out, "Is this really for us?" Adrian's throat tightened. "Yes," he said, "it's for you." Their laughter rang out, bright against the twilight. Adrian felt the fire inside him ease for the first time in months, replaced by a quiet certainty. Whatever trials lay ahead, board votes, protests, family wars, this was why he endured them. This was proof that the fire was worth it. But shadows still loomed. That night his mother's message arrived. "You may have won today, but are tearing this family apart. Choose wisely before it's too late." Adrian stared at the words, then deleted the message. For the first time, he did not feel bound by them. His path was clear, though it led through fire. He would walk it anyway. The trial of fire had begun, but Adrian Cross was no longer afraid of the flames. The weeks after the boardroom trial carried an uneasy calm. On the surface, North Spire moved forward, meetings resumed, contracts advanced. The Jefferson Civic Center climbed higher with each passing day. Yet, beneath the rhythm of progress, shadows lingered. Adrian Cross felt them pressing against him whenever he walked the corridors of the firm. Eyes followed him, some with admiration, others with resentment. He had survived the removal vote, but survival was different from peace. At night, he found himself haunted by memories of his father. The stern figure who had built the Royce legacy loomed larger than ever in Adrian's mind. A ghost seated across from him at the drafting table. His father's voice echoed with each decision. Reputation above all. Control is survival. Emotion is weakness. Adrian would wake in the dark hours before dawn, sweat on his brow, the old lessons clashing violently with the man he was trying to become. Maya noticed the weight he carried. They met often at the Jefferson site, where her energy seemed tireless, her conviction unshaken. She walked among the workers, spoke with residents, adjusted sketches with the same ease she commanded in council chambers. One evening, as they reviewed blueprints under the fading light, she studied him quietly before speaking. "You carry ghosts with you, Adrian." He looked up, startled. "Ghosts?" "Yes," she said. "Your father, your mother. The weight of a name you no longer believe in. You can't build a new world while dragging the ashes of the old one behind you." Her words struck deep. He wanted to argue, but instead he found himself admitting the truth. "I don't know how to let go." "You don't let go," Maya said softly. "You burn it down and you rise from it." Her eyes lingered on him, not accusing but challenging. In that look, Adrian realized that transformation was not only about changing North Spire. It was about burning away the parts of himself forged in arrogance and blindness. The chance came sooner than he expected. His mother summoned him again to the Royce estate, this time with a sharper edge in her voice. When he arrived, the atmosphere was colder than before. Eleanor sat in the grand study, portraits of ancestors gazing down like silent judges. Evelyn was there too, her expression unreadable. "You defied us once," Eleanor began, "but I will not watch you destroy this family again. If you continue on this path, Adrian, you will not inherit this estate nor the Royce holdings." Adrian's chest tightened, though he had anticipated the ultimatum. "All my life you've told me the Royce name is everything," he said. "But what has that name really built? Towers of glass, monuments to ego, nothing that endures." Eleanor's voice was sharp. "It built power. It built respect."
Respect from whom? Adrian demanded. The wealthy? The elite? What about the people who walk in our shadows, look at our towers, and see nothing for themselves? The air between them snapped with tension. Eleanor's eyes blazed with fury, but Evelyn spoke first. "He's right, Mother. Times are changing. If we cling to the past, we'll crumble with it." Silence followed, heavy and suffocating. At last, Eleanor turned away, her voice low but cutting. "Then you are no longer my son." The words were knives, sharper than Adrian expected. Yet as he left the estate, a strange calm settled over him. The chains of legacy had been severed. Painful as it was, he was free. News of the family fracture spread quickly. The press feasted on the story of a scion disowned, branding Adrian reckless, a man at war with his own blood. Yet to his surprise, support also grew. Letters poured in from young architects, students, even ordinary citizens who saw in him not disgrace but defiance. They wrote of hope, gratitude, and belief in a future beyond glass towers. At Northspire, the strain mounted. Evelyn Sharp and her allies pushed back harder, questioning budgets, slowing approvals, and seeding doubt in meetings. But the Jefferson Civic Center pressed forward, and with each new beam erected, Adrian felt the ashes of his past scattering further away. One night, long after the offices had emptied, he stood by the windows overlooking the city. The skyline glittered, but his eyes were fixed on the rising skeleton of the Civic Center in the distance. Behind him, Maya entered quietly. "You're still here," she said. "So are you," Adrian replied. She came to stand beside him, the reflection of the city glowing in her eyes. "You've lost much," she said softly. "Your name, your family." Adrian exhaled. "I thought losing them would break me. But maybe it's the only way to be whole." Maya's gaze lingered on him, her voice low. "The fire has burned you, Adrian, but I see what's left. And it isn't ashes, it's strength." He turned to her, the distance between them narrowing, the silence alive with unspoken truths. For months, he had been pulled toward her, bound by admiration, haunted by guilt, challenged by her vision. As the city hummed beyond the glass, he understood what he felt was no longer doubt or confusion. It was something more profound, fierce, and undeniable. "Maya," he began, but she stopped him with a shake of her head. "Not yet. There's still too much to build, too much to prove." He nodded, accepting her boundary, but inside, he carried her words like a flame, strength, not ashes. Days later, a fire of another kind struck. The Jefferson site was vandalized in the night. Graffiti scarred the steel beams, machinery was damaged, and rumors swirled of rival firms orchestrating sabotage. The community awoke in outrage, residents gathering at the site to defend what was theirs. Maya stood before them, her voice calm but resolute. "This project will not fall. Not to fear, not to hatred." Adrian stood beside her, his own anger burning hot. He promised the residents that the Civic Center would rise stronger than ever, and for the first time, he felt not like a man defending himself, but like a man defending something greater than he had ever known. As the sun rose over the damaged site, the workers began repairs immediately. Children painted over the graffiti with bright colors, turning the scars into symbols of resilience. And amidst the chaos, Adrian realized the truth of what Maya had told him. The ashes of his past no longer defined him. Something alive, something unshakable, was beginning to rise from those ashes. The fire that once threatened to consume him had become the fire that forged him.
And though the path ahead was uncertain, Adrian Cross no longer feared the flames. He welcomed them. The Jefferson Civic Center neared completion, its skeletal frame now cloaked in glass and stone, its plazas beginning to take shape with wide steps and open spaces that echoed the sketches Maya had once drawn on a whiteboard. The air around the site thrummed with energy. Children pressed their faces to the fences, imagining concerts and markets. Elders nodded with quiet approval, and shopkeepers spoke of the business that would come when the plaza was alive with people. The building was no longer an idea, it was a promise, and promises had power. Adrian stood on the scaffolding one early morning, hard hat secured, surveying the progress. The sun broke across the horizon, painting the glass with streaks of gold. For months he had been haunted by the shadows of legacy, but here in the light of dawn he felt something different. A sense of belonging, not to the Royce name, not to the hollow towers of the past, but to the future that was rising from the ground below him. Behind him, footsteps echoed. Maya climbed the scaffolding with practiced ease, her hair pulled back, her eyes sharp with determination. "You never sleep, do you?" she said, standing beside him. "Not when there's so much to build," Adrian replied. She studied him quietly, then turned her gaze toward the city beyond. Seattle stretched before them, glittering, alive. For the first time, the skyline felt less like a fortress and more like a canvas. Maya said, "The council has approved the contracts for the following 2 community projects. It's official. Northspire is leading them." Adrian exhaled, relief washing over him. "That means the board will back down, for now." "For now," Maya agreed. "But this is only the beginning." They descended together, walking through the unfinished plaza. Workers nodded as they passed, their respect clear in every glance. Adrian was no longer just a figure in a tailored suit for them. He was a man who had stood beside them when the project was vandalized, fought for their vision when investors doubted, walked through fire, and refused to bend. Later that day, Adrian faced the board again. This time, the atmosphere was different. The contracts Maya had secured, the momentum of Jefferson, the swelling public support, it all weighed heavily in his favor. Lawrence Pierce, ever the pragmatist, acknowledged it. "Mr. Cross, your gamble has yielded results. The board will continue monitoring your progress, but you have our confidence." Evelyn Sharp scowled, but she could not deny the facts. The tide had shifted. For the first time in months, Adrian walked out of the boardroom, not as a man under siege, but as a leader reshaping the firm. Yet the victory felt incomplete. His mother's words still lingered. "You are no longer my son." He had not spoken to Eleanor since that night, and though he told himself he no longer needed her approval, the wound remained. One evening, he returned to the Royce estate unannounced. The halls were quiet, the portraits still watching with cold eyes. Eleanor sat in the parlor, her expression unreadable as he entered. "Why are you here?" she asked. Adrian took a slow breath. "Not for forgiveness, not for permission. I came to tell you that the Royce legacy is not dead, it's changing. And whether you claim me or not, I will carry it forward differently." Eleanor's gaze hardened. "You think you can redefine centuries of tradition with one building?" "Not one building," Adrian said. "Many. Each one was built not for power, but for people." Silence stretched, broken only by the ticking of the mantel clock. At last, Eleanor turned away. "Do as you will, but do not expect me to stand beside you." Adrian nodded. "Then I will stand without you." He left the estate, and though her rejection still ached, he felt lighter. The chains had fallen away completely. The Jefferson Civic Center neared its grand opening as spring turned into summer. The plaza was alive with final touches. Trees planted, benches installed, murals painted by local artists. The building no longer belonged to Northspire, or even to Adrian and Maya. It belonged to the community, the children laughing on its steps, the musicians filling the air with sound, and the families gathering beneath its wide arches. The night before the opening, Adrian and Maya stood together in the empty plaza. The city lights shimmered around them, the air warm with anticipation. "Do you ever think about how far we've come?" Adrian asked. "Every day," Maya replied. But it's not just about us. It's about everyone who will step into this place and feel like it belongs to them." Adrian looked at her, the weight of everything they had endured pressing into the silence. "Maya," he said softly, "you once asked what proof I could offer that I had changed. Here it is. This building. This plaza. This future." Maya's eyes lingered on him, the steel in them softening. "You've proven much, Adrian. Not just to me, to yourself." The opening day dawned bright and clear. Crowds filled the plaza, music rose, food vendors lined the edges, and children ran across the steps with laughter. The mayor spoke, the council praised, but the actual moment belonged to the people. Adrian stood at the crowd's edge, watching as life filled the space he had once only imagined. Maya stood beside him, her presence radiant, her laughter mingling with the music. For the first time in years, Adrian felt whole. When he finally stepped onto the stage to speak, the crowd quieted. He looked at the faces before him, faces of every age, color, and story. "For years," he said, "I built towers of glass and steel that reached the sky but never touched the ground. But this is different. This is not my building. It is yours. It is ours. And it is only the beginning." The applause that followed was thunderous, not for him alone, but for the vision that had taken root in every heart present. As the sun dipped low and lanterns lit the plaza, Adrian and Maya walked among the people, no longer architects above them, but companions beside them. And in that rising dawn of a new chapter, Adrian finally knew the truth. He had not lost his legacy, he had transformed it. The Royce name no longer bound him. The walls of his past no longer defined him. He had built something enduring out of fire, ashes, and struggle, not just a building, but a life reborn. Besides him, Maya Johnson was no longer a challenger or a colleague. She was the partner who had seen him when he was blind, pushed him when he faltered, and walked with him through shadows into light. The skyline stretched before them, gleaming in the night. But for Adrian Cross, the monument was alive in laughter and song, in the heartbeat of a community that finally had a place to call its own. The rising dawn was not just for North Spire, not just for Jefferson. It was for him, for her, for everyone who dared to believe that architecture could be more than walls. It could be hope, it could be changed, it could be home.